What's up, everybody? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Lead From Here podcast. Today we are talking about disconnecting as a leader. This kind of ties back to the balance conversation we had about balancing yourself in leadership. And so I'll link that below in the description. But ultimately, disconnecting as a leader is something that I was terrible at for a very long time. And something that I have more recently embraced disconnection because I found that over time, if you've been with the company for a while, especially, but it doesn't take that much time. It only takes a couple months if you're not disconnecting properly to kind of start showing signs of burnout, frustration, not being as good as you want to be in a situation. Disconnecting, not disconnecting, staying connected all the time, especially nowadays when you're working from home, is very easy to stay connected way more than you can or should mentally handle. And that sounds like you're not strong enough, but it's the reality of the human nature is that you can't stay that focused on something for so long without burning out. So early on in my career, I worked for a company, and when I started, it was a very small dev group, and when I left, it was a very large dev group. In that 2.5 years I was there, I took one vacation, and I worked 80 hours that week. It was awful. I was in a bad headspace, and I ended up being asked to resign from that company. It was not pretty. It was not a good space. This was not a good spot. I also got a divorce and towards the end of that too. So I was just in a really bad space. And I was really in a position where I felt like I had topped out on salary. And I was really in a position where I felt like I didn't have any options going forward, which was not the case at all. I was just in a bad headspace. All that came from being on for basically 2.5 years. I mean, certainly I had weekends, certainly I had downtime, but there was no, even when I was down, I was checking my phone and checking my email and doing whatever I could to keep things moving forward because, we were a small team out of the gate. So fast forward to now, where I'm at, what I learned out of that was if you don't disconnect, you burn out. If you burn out, you're not useful to anybody. So how do you effectively disconnect? Well, there's a lot of different ways, and there's major extremes on both ends. But ultimately, what I would say from my perspective is find blocks of time in your calendar to just shut your email off, shut your chat off. It doesn't have to be hours and hours, but 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Read, go for a walk. Just sit there and think about other things. Watch TV, whatever helps you disconnect and be in the moment with what you're doing right now. If you do that, you can disconnect and breathe. The other part is use your PTO. Use all of it. As much as you possibly can. As much as you're allowed to use without getting yourself in trouble, without letting your team down, impacting them. Find that balance and use it. PTO is there for a reason. It is to allow you to disconnect. It is allow you to reset. And if you do those things, you will feel much better and be much better at your job. Now, as you climb the corporate ladder, that becomes harder and harder because your expectations of availability change. They become greater, ultimately, the higher you get in a company. So it's really important to have those dedicated times where I have communicated to my leaders, to my peers, I am shutting off for this amount of time. I am shutting off for this, shutting off for that. You are owed PTO. So at the end of the day, I end up taking between 4 and 6 weeks of PTO most years. Of those 6 weeks, especially in the most recent years, I will probably have 1 to 2 weeks where I'm totally shut off. I don't look at my messaging thing. I don't look at email. I don't do anything. The other 4, I have very specific blocks of time where I'm just I'm not available here to here. I'm not available here to here. If something comes up, I'm happy to throw in and help. Or if an escalation happens, I'm happy to throw in. If servers go down or whatever, I'm happy to throw in these other times. But that's because I've chosen to support my team in that way. If you can get away with it, I would recommend taking as many weeks as you can, disconnected from everything that is work, because it helps you reset your brain, drop all of the chaos that's happening from your job, which is just natural. It's not a negative talk about any business because it's just part of business. If you're a successful company, you have a lot of competing priorities and a lot of chaos that comes along with that. And that's all positive in the long run if it's managed properly. So part of that is disconnecting. Managing it properly is disconnecting, letting that kind of settle, letting yourself settle, refreshing your brain and coming back with a fresh perspective and a fresh brain and more effective at your job. So that's what I would recommend is find blocks of time. If you're not a guy or girl that is hey, I don't take weeks off. I don't travel. I just like being at home. Fine. pick a Friday, every other Friday or one Friday a month. Stay home, shut everything off, do whatever it is that brings you joy and go do that. It doesn't have to be week chunks. It doesn't have to be month chunks. It doesn't have to be anything. It can be a day here and a day there. But if you're not doing that, you're going to burn out. You're going to put yourself in a bad situation, which ultimately puts your team and your company in a bad situation. So take care of yourself, disconnect, and find the things you find passion in and do those things. That helps tremendously in the long run, especially when you're at a company for a very long time. Hope this is helpful. If you have any questions or any other ideas on how to disconnect, please hit me up, jason@leadfromhere.co. And if you like what you're listening to, subscribe, follow, like, all those good things. I would greatly appreciate it. And yeah, take care of yourself.